So, hi guys, this is really going to be a short video, or at least I plan on this being a short video because this is a chapter that we should really discuss. Not it should not be just me telling you about things and how race is viewed in America today, because it's a very difficult topic and very finicky topic, if I can say that. And the problem here is also that, okay, so when I started teaching this course, I got uh, I got some notes from Reka Feher Reka on how she teaches each different topic, and her notes for this chapter started with the sentence that this chapter is shit. I think I mentioned it before that this book was written by upper middle class white people for upper middle class white people, and this chapter on race really wants to sell you this fairy tale idea about how great is the situation of black people and different minorities right now in the United States, which is bullshit, because it's still really terrible. Racism is still rampant. The Ku Klux Klan is is bigger than ever in the last couple of decades, so it really sucks. And I wrote some notes as I read the chapter, and there is some things that I want to discuss here, but I really count on you to give me uh your own ideas and your own comments and how you see race today in America. So just to see, yeah, the chapter starts with just a bit of revision, this idea of the melting pot. So once again, as we talked about this, there are actually three metaphors for the American culture, the cultural makeup of America, and this is the melting pot, the salad bowl, and the mosaic. In the melting pot, all cultures are melted together to give one mixed culture. In the salad bowl, each culture keeps most of its flavor, but they grew together and they are infected with the other flavors as well. It's a really bad analogy, sorry. And the mosaic is each individual culture giving one big picture. But that's about the metaphors. Just remember these three metaphors: the melting pot, the salad bowl, and the mosaic. Now, what really jumped out to me in the chapter is when it talked about the citizenship classes that were given to new immigrants, and it just made me remember what the US did to Native Americans. And this is something that the chapter, of course, doesn't talk about because it's ugly. It's not something they want to remember or want to be remembered by. And basically what they did, that they forcefully taken Native American children from their families. They renamed them, they christianed them, they forced them to abandon their old ways, their old culture. They cut their hair, they given them Christian names and raised them as Christians. They were forcefully taken from their families. Remember that, forcefully taken from their families so they could be raised as Christians, because they wanted to eradicate Native American culture so much. Uh, biculturalism. This is also something that the chapter talks in such a fairy tale, rainbows and happiness way, and there are still so big problems there. It talks about Jews, for example, a bit, which is a very interesting topic. This is something that I've dealt with in the last couple of weeks, incidentally, directly, more specifically the Hasidic Jewish community in New York. They are concentrated in different neighborhoods in New York, for example, Williamsburg. They are a very fundamentalist Jewish group who are scorning internet, for example. They have very strict rules. They basically live in their own world with very little influence from the overall American culture and Western culture. They use matchmakers. They have things like if you're a married woman, you cannot show your hair. So married women wear wigs on the street, which is kind of crazy because uh, all cultures have this idea of covering the hair, but most of them do it with scarves, not with what is basically another set of hair. And this is just very interesting, I think. Netflix has a new series about the Hasidic community and about a young girl breaking out of the Hasidic community called Unorthodox. I watched it. It's very interesting. But you yeah, sorry, I was using hand cream and I'm just playing with the stuff that is around me. Yeah, so if you watch it, take it with a pinch of salt, okay? Because these things, even if they are inspired by real events, they are not showing you real events. So there the Hasidic community is shown in a pretty bad way, a pretty bad light, and I'm not saying that is completely wrong, but there are very many loving people there and nice people, but they have very strict rules which can suck, especially if you are a woman. Now, black people. Oh my god, this chapter is really bad on black people. What you have to understand, for example, that the chapter says that slavery was against the idea of equality of opportunity. No, slavery is recorded in the Constitution. When the states were deciding how to count the population of each state when determining how many representatives that given state get, they had something. Okay, there is a bug. So they decided on something called the 3/5 rule, which meant that a slave was counted as 3/5 of a person. They were less than a person. And even after slavery was abolished, black people were disenfranchised. This means that they had no right to vote. Different states created different laws to keep black people out of politics. For example, they made laws about poll taxes, that if you wanted to vote, you had to pay a tax. Black people were poor, they had no money, they could not vote. They had literacy tests. You could not vote if you couldn't read. Many black people couldn't read, or tying the vote to how much money a person had, if they had a home. So for a very, very long time, and even today, black people were still very disadvantaged, no matter that there was no actual slavery. Things were in action, for example, the 1-drop rule, which meant that if you had just 1 drop of black blood in you, like you had a black grandparent, you were counted racially as black, even if you could pass. Passing means basically means that pretending to be something that you are not to gain a social advantage. So for example, if you're mixed race but you are white enough, then you can pass as a white person. Or if you are gay and you are in the closet, then you are passing as a straight person. This is passing. But the law said that if you had one drop of black blood in you, then you were legally black. There was segregation, which is something that you saw in the movie that you had to watch. Up until the 60s, black people had to use different bathrooms. They had different drinking fountains. They could only sit in the back of the bus. There were segregated schools. And the problem with schools is that school funding is tied to property taxes, to taxes coming from taxes paid after houses and estates. And sorry. And black people lived in poor areas. They had lower property taxes, so the schools got less money. So being a black person sucked, and it still sucks. Think about just police brutality, how especially black men are being chased down by the police and shot by the police simply for walking down the street, because they say that, okay, that person is a threat, that person is a criminal. There is a racial bias in basically in every walk of life. But in the case of the police especially, it's actually I'm watching this sitcom called Mixed-ish. This is a spin-off of Blackish, which is about a black family in the suburbs in a white neighborhood. Mixed-ish is about the childhood of the mother, who is mixed race. She has a black mother and a white father. And the series is set in the mid-80s, where having a mixed family, being from a mixed families, was still very much unusual. And there was just this one episode where she has a younger brother. He's 11 in the story, and he wanted to go to a cop camp, a police camp. And the father, the white father, was pretty much against it because he was aware of how the police is viewing black people and how biased the police is against black people, and that you shouldn't be complicit in that. You shouldn't want to become a policeman as a black person because of how the police is treating black people. Meanwhile, the black mother, actually wanted the child to go to this camp because she had this idea that if the local police actually knows her child, knows this guy, that he's a nice young boy, that he is no threat, then if such situation arises when he would be in danger of police brutality, he would be left alone because the local police knows him as an actual person. And sorry, I'm okay. I've been talking for over an hour by now because I recorded another video for my other group, and that's why I'm coughing. I'm fine, I promise. And so the narrator actually says that this is something that black mothers used to do a lot, introducing their children to the local police because they believed that it would save them and help them. And it's not only the police that is biased against black people. There is also a medical bias. People believing that black people has thicker skin or has a higher pain tolerance because they're more like animals. They actually believe that people are more like animals than white people. It's also seen in maternal mortality of black women dying in childbirth. If I can just list another good piece of media, The Resident did a very touching episode on the mortality of black mothers last season. I can't remember the exact episode number or title, but they used an actual life story of a young black mother who gave birth to her second child via C-section, and she had internal bleeding. This is something that is present in the series as well. She had a C-section, she had internal bleeding, she was complaining of pain and of feeling badly, feeling unwell, but the doctors didn't take her seriously. And by the time they realized that there was something wrong, they couldn't save her, and she died. Both the actual person and her counterpart in the series. And the series actually talks about this unconscious bias. There is this very touching scene after the death of this woman. It has 3 characters in it: an older white male doctor and 2 residents, a black woman and an Indian guy. And these two, the latter two, the black woman and the Indian man, are talking about this unconscious bias of medical workers. And the white guy just goes that I've known the doctor and the nurse who treated this woman. I've known them for decades, for years, and I've never seen them having racial bias. And the other 2 characters just look at him that, okay, you wouldn't notice because you are a white person as well, and you're just not aware of racial bias in that way. Yeah, apart from that, what I wanted to talk in the context of black people is also racial appropriation. When there are costumes and traditions of different races, there are some stuff that are open to people of other races when that culture is freely offering that. For example, Chinese food, Indian food. This is so you can be white and like Chinese food and Indian food. That's okay. That's not cultural appropriation, but there are things, for example, like cornrows. Those braids of hair. This is also something that my old American culture explained to us very neatly, that cornrows were seen as an easy way to maintain hair. When you were working on the fields, you had, of course, black hair. Black hair is different than white hair, and putting black hair into cornrows was a neat way of protecting it and handling it. And it was associated with the lower status of being black. And then white people started wearing cornrows as a fashion statement without being aware of the cultural implications of such a hairstyle. And also dreads. Okay, people, please do not wear dreads. White hair is not made for dreads. Wearing dreads is actually very culturally and racially insensitive. Okay, black hair is kinky. That is the actual word, kinky. Black hair is kinky. It is made, okay, not made, but it is of a form that is to be made into dreads. White hair, smooth white hair, is not made to be made into dreads. White hair in dreads is just unhygienic. It's just dirty. So please don't do dreads. That's racially insensitive. And there is like all those harmful stereotypes rampant in media of black people being good at basketball, of Asian people being very perfectionist and very smart. And even when they seem as innocent stereotypes, it can really hurt people And also just think about the representation of minorities in Hollywood. The last movie, Hollywood movie with a completely Asian cast was the Joy-Luck Club in 1993 up until 2018 when Crazy Rich Asians premiered. Just look at that. 25 years went on in Hollywood without a movie with a completely Asian cast. And at the same time, we have 9 Fast and Furious movies by now. And how many movies do we have with kind of average white guys doing action stuff? I mean, just Bruce Willis, how many movies like that has? So yeah, it sucks. And there's also something, if I remember well, that this is something that the chapter also mentioned, that especially for Asians, they are seen as one homogenic group, not differentiating Chinese people, Filipino people, Japanese people. This is something that I've read a book about. It's a really good book if you can get your hands on it. It's called The Shanghai Girls by Lisa See. It's set in San Francisco, mostly in San Francisco, from 1936 till 56. It's about 2 sisters who are basically sold into marriage to 2 Chinese guys living in San Francisco, and so they leave China to live with their husbands. And it spans throughout the Second World War and the Red Scare, the fear of communism. And during the Second World War, these Chinese people, the main character, one of the girls, her family, they have a grocery store, I think, or some kind of store. It's been a couple of years since I read that book. And the younger sister, she works in movies. And during the Second World War, they are being harassed for looking like the Japanese. And after that, they are being harassed by being Chinese because of Mao's rise in China at the time and the rise of communism in China. So it's bad. It's ugly, it's bad, and racism is still rampant in the US. And this is basically what I wanted to tell you, and I just want to open a discussion on race, of what we can see of racial relations here in Hungary, what we can see in Hollywood, in series and stuff like that. And here is my task for you this week. I want you to bring up and post about one piece of media, movies, series, books, comics that are somehow showcasing racial relations and how racism is still rampant in the US right now. So this is your task for this week. And I'm ending this video, and thank you for watching it. And I'm really looking forward to us having an actual conversation about racial relations in the US. And thank you very much.